The C-SPAN Civics bus is traveling the country, visiting libraries, bookstores, festivals, and authors. Here are some of the people and places we visited.
My name is David Dorado Romo, and the title of my book is Ringside C2, A Revolution, An Underground Cultural History of El Paso and Juarez. My book is a different approach to the Mexican Revolution. I actually started looking for Pancho Villa, and I found that the underground stories, the cultural stories of the border were a lot more fascinating than the usual figures doing the shooting. And so that's the approach of my book. I look at the underground culture of the borders, such as film, photography, music, and other aspects too, like public health, architecture, on this side of the border, not necessarily so much on the Mexican side, even though it is. El Paso and Juarez are twin cities directly across each other. Mm-hmm. But a lot of people don't know just how important an American city, El Paso, Texas, was in helping to spark the revolution. And that's really what I focus on.
So how did you go about doing your research for the book?
Well, originally it actually started from a grant that I received from Mexico City, a combination of the Rockefeller Foundation and Fideo Comiso gave me a grant to look at this underground culture of the border. So what I found is a huge amount of untold stories. I mean, there's just this kind of absolute silence of a certain period in the border, just a fascinating, very important period, which is the Mexican Revolution. And I started looking more into that. For instance, I would find that there would be music played during executions in Mexico. And the music they were playing they weren't necessarily the corridos, which is the music that you usually associate as kind of folkloristic songs, but they were playing Aida by Verdi, opera and what have you. And I thought, this is very interesting. It has a lot of significance. I mean, filmmakers from all over the world come in this period, in 1911, when the Battle of Juarez is going on, which is an attempt by people like Pancho Villa and Madero, the revolutionary heroes, most of them from the border, to overthrow the dictatorship of Mexico under Porfirio Diaz. So I thought that you could see things differently if you concentrate on what many considered the peripheral figures, and kind of a different approach to a people's history of the border, focusing on the culture.
And there were a couple characters. There was a maid and there was the mayor of El Paso. What are their names? And very briefly, how did they? What role did they play? Actually,
this is probably the story that attracted the most attention, not only here in El Paso, but I've gotten calls from outside of the United States and Mexico, because the story of Carmelita Torres in 1917, which she was a woman from Juarez, a 17-year-old young lady from Juarez that would cross every day to clean American homes. And during that time in 1917, the U.S. customs officials, the public health officials, would force the Mexican border crossers to undergo a very humiliating process of fumigation and delousing, and they would force them to take baths. And so there was this young woman that's considered kind of like the Rosa Parks of the border that arms a protest against this. And there were about 2,000 women that just absolutely refused to go through this very humiliating process of delousings. It was a policy on the border that continued for many, many, actually decades, even into later in the 40s and 50s with the Bracero program, because of this anti-immigrant scare that obviously today is very relevant, that you were having kind of this disease and dirt that was crossing over from the border. And it was brought about by this mayor that you talk about. His name was Tom Lee Sr. And he was the one that pushed the U.S. surgeon to create these quarantine camps. And I talk about in my book that he used to wear silk underwear because he was told that lice does not stick to silk. And so I find these just very interesting details and anecdotes. And with that narrative, I make broader connections. For instance, one of the things that I discovered was that one of the pesticides that was used to fumigate the clothing of the Mexican border crossers was Zyklon B. And as you know, Zyklon B was the pesticide that was used in Germany in the concentration camps. That was later used in concentrated forms to actually carry out the final solution. So there's these kind of eerie micro-historical connections to the broader history. And I can't go into it. I hope you read the book so that you can look more into that. But that really is my perspective of going into micro-history and then tying it up with much larger issues.
And the name of the book again is Ringside Sea to a Revolution. And Mr. Romo, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
You can view Book TV programs, sign up for a weekly email of our schedule, and learn about upcoming programs at booktv.org. You can click on the Viewer Input tab and email us. Tell us what you're reading and what you think of our programs.